Welcome to this debate where we will be discussing about the green future for the EU and discussing if the green future can also be socially equal. My name is Sophie. I'm a student from the Confederation for Trade Unions in Denmark, and I will be leading you through this debate today. This topic, I believe, is in the heart for most socialists and social democrats, especially because the green transition should preferably not be in spite of the lower classes in society or disadvantaged people in certain geographical regions. So this is definitely a topic where we will be discussing how we find the right balance between these two situations. Luckily, we have three experienced social democrats on stage ready to discuss this issue with all of us. I will encourage all of you to just raise your hand if you have a question during the debate, and then I will, of course, try to fit you in. We have here on stage Chahim from Denmark. We also have Mohammed Chahim? Yes, from the Netherlands, and then we have Helena Fritzson from Sweden. Perfect. We will be spending the next hour together here, and of course, as I said, please ask questions if you have any questions. We have, of course, prepared some questions for the debate, but if there is anything that you would like to ask, then use this opportunity to ask the questions. This is why we are here. But first, to warm up, I would like all of you to make a short presentation. Just say who you are and why you think this topic is important and why we should be discussing it. We can maybe start here with Kirsten.
Yeah, but I was wondering whether we should invite our two vice presidents of the Socialist Group in the European Parliament to start, and maybe even Mohammed, because he's the responsible for the green transition in our group.
Yes, very good idea. Do that.
Okay, well, good to see you all here. I'm Mohammed Chahim. I'm a colleague from the Netherlands, colleague of Christel and Helen in the European Parliament.
Have you turned on?
Yeah, you can hear me. Should I change my voice? And I'm responsible for the European Green Deal, and I remember that in the beginning we as Social Democrats always used to say that, the Green Deal will be, if it's climate justice can only be there if there's social justice. And sometimes I can tell you that we were not ridiculized, but sometimes laughed at, like, what do you mean? I mean, at the end of the day today we see what we mean. Because if you have to choose between whether you eat something or whether you heat your house, then it's very problematic for people to become emotional and enthusiastic about the transition. And this is, I think, something very important. In the Netherlands, we have a saying where we say that it's very hard to go green when your bank account is red. And I think this is something that's quite factual, and we, unfortunately, reality has shown us what it could mean today. I mean, we are in an energy crisis today. Prices have almost increased by a tenfold, even here in Denmark. I think even I just spoke to someone from Norway, where they have quite significant amounts of own energy, and even there the prices have raised in such a way that I think it's becoming more and more problematic for most people to finance their energy bill. And most people in the Netherlands, we're talking about roughly 30%, one-third of the people that have problems with paying their energy bill, which is a lot. And those who can, I mean, for them it's a big share of their income. So for me and for us as Social Democrats, from the beginning, we always were quite enthusiastic about, the green transition. But it's not only about the dot at the end of the horizon, or in the horizon. It's about the path that we take towards that goal. And that path should be inclusive. Not only, and I think Helen will talk about it, because just transition is not only about poor and rich, it's also about the groups that you can help make sure that they can also not only contribute, but also gain from this transition. So what we said in the beginning, we need to have good financing, and the transition should be bottom up. We need people like you to come to us, discuss with us things, to make sure that the plans that we make in Brussels, which is not that far away in kilometers, but it feels quite far away when it comes to the legislation that we work on. But I can promise you one thing. We do it with such an enthusiasm and shots always from the perspective of what does this mean to normal people, people that we represent in every European country. And for us, at the end of the day, we are willing to change our plans if it turns out that these plans are not providing what they should do. And now, in this crisis that we are dealing with, we didn't finish the plans, and now we're waiting and sitting on our chair, expecting us to don't do anything. We are still analyzing, evaluating every issue we see, and try to see whether we can come up with new ideas and new policies needed. But one thing, I want to be very honest, we need to speed up this green transition. That's my conclusion when I look at the crisis that we are in. And we need to do it with a lot of public money. We need to co-invest in these new technologies that are created also by small companies here in Denmark. Because the only way forward is if Europe becomes less dependent from people like Putin. That's the only way forward. And if we can do it in such a way that it's also affordable, then it's a win-win situation. That's my intro.
Perfect. Helena?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm also a member of the European Parliament since the election 2019, and there I'm responsible for gender equality, children's rights, and also all the issues related to young people. So I'm very happy to see today that there are very many young people here listen to this important discussion. Before that, I was a minister in the Swedish government, and before that, many years I was a mayor in my hometown, Kristianstad, in Sweden. It's a city founded by a Danish king, Christian IV. And I tell you that because I think it's very important to underline that if we are going to really do the green transition, we must have a good cooperation between the local level, the regional level, the national level, and the international level. Because the climate issue is both a local issue and a global issue. So I really look forward to the discussion here today, because we need to take further steps. Thank you.
Great. Kirsten?
Thanks a lot, and it's really great to see colleagues from other parts of Europe here today, trying to see if we can inspire our group in the European Parliament to make more meetings like this. We have Almedalsveckan in Sweden, and we have other political festivals throughout Europe, but it's really great to see you here. Anyway, you have already said a lot, but I would like to add one thing, and that is we need to make sure that the green transition is social, does not create problems for people, and it should not create more inequality. But it should not lead to the conclusion that we should be less ambitious in the green transition. So we still need to have very high ambitions in order to try to solve the climate crisis. And we are in a hurry. And I guess that if we look out in Europe along this summer with the droughts and the heat waves, we've just seen how it will be in the future. The climate in the future will be like this. The summers in the coming years will be more or less like the one we've had. And maybe we think here in Denmark it's nice to have a warm and hot summer for once. but you know, it's not so good anyway, because it's because of the climate changes. So we cannot be less ambitious. But what we need to do is that we need to be very ambitious, and we're fighting for that in the European Parliament, and our group is really ambitious when it comes to the green transition. But at the same time, we also realize that we cannot deliver on the green transition unless we make sure that it's also just when it comes to the social consequences. We need to help people who are poor. So when we put more costs on the energy in order to make people be aware of to save energy, but also because of the cost of Putin, then we need to help the people who have the least. So we need to be sure that it has no negative consequences for the poorest. Otherwise we cannot deliver, but we must not be less ambitious. Climate changes are here, and they will have a huge negative impact if we, in fact, it's the final call we're out in now. We need to do something now, and EU has the capacity because of the size and the number of member states and the money. We're one of the richest regions in the world. We need to be the one who goes in front and find solutions and pay for it. And we need to deliver ourselves. Otherwise, we cannot demand from others to deliver as well. So that's what we're fighting for, a balance. But it does not mean that we are less ambitious. We need to be very ambitious, and that's what we fight for. Thanks.
I think definitely what's interesting about this debate is that the people are in the heart of the climate crisis. We can't do anything if we don't have the people with us. We can't elect politicians who want a green transition if we don't have the people with us. So of course we always need to focus on the people in themselves. Quite recently you adopted the Fit for 55 amendment in the European Parliament. And I would like to ask you, what do you think? Because when we look at the Fit for 55, or when I look at it, then there is a lot of different parts of it saying that the workplaces should do this, or the different nation states should do this. But what do you think that the Fit for 55 will actually, how will it affect the people? Like regular people in each nation state, what does the Fit for 55 change here?
So, if I may, Crystal?
I think you should start.
By the way, to be honest, in our group we have a lot of debates. We have approximately 150 members from 27 member states. And we don't think like 100% the same on all topics. Sometimes people are fighting to be more progressive and others are a bit more conservative. And I can tell you that in our group, I am standing between two people that were fighting in the most progressive way they can to make sure that the Fit for 55 plans were just a bit more than we wanted in the beginning. And usually they were fighting me, because as a vice president responsible, they have to find a bit of a balance. But at the end, I think we managed to have a very ambitious package. And what it does for you, I think it changes the perspective on who is responsible for decreasing carbon. Because I love that people take individual measures. For example, choose to walk instead of taking the car, or taking the car instead of flying, eating less meat. I love these individual responsibilities. But at the end of the day, collective problems need collective solutions. What we did with the Fit for 55 package is all these individual actions that you take are drips on a hot plate. And they are wonderful, but they are not efficient if the flame under the plate is still on. And with Fit for 55, what we do is we try to slowly kill the flame by putting responsibility where it should be, namely with industry and some other factors. Because if industry starts producing products that are sustainable, and these products are the cheapest, as at the end of the day it's also about price, remember, you cannot go green when your bank account is red, then people become sustainable without being aware of it. If the cheapest way to go to Barcelona is through, let's say, an electric plane or a fast train, then of course you will do that. If, you know, when I was a student, if I asked for a vegetarian meal, I usually got a paprika with rice in it. That's it. That was the most fantasy a chef had. Today, you can get vegetarian, like almost meaty, fake meat things that you cannot distinguish between them. I think that if we push industry to become more sustainable, then you all become more sustainable without even wanting to become sustainable. Because people don't care whether they drive from Mariager, sorry for my mispronunciation, to Copenhagen. If they can afford an electric car, they will just use an electric car. People aren't that sentimental about driving a stick or whatever. I mean, young people don't have their own cars anymore. So we push with the Fit for 55 industry and some other sectors to make sure that their products will become 100% sustainable at the latest by 2050. But as soon as possible. And, which is a money point, we make sure that all the money that industry is getting, because when I have my debates in my city in Helmond, it's a small village in the southeast of the Netherlands, people tell me, yes, sustainability costs money. And I always tell them, you know how much money we give to the fossil fuel industry yearly? Directly and indirectly, if you calculate everything, it's around $400 billion a year. If I would go to krona, it's like, what is it? 400, that's like 20,000 billion krona or something. It's a lot of money. If we would use that money to push it in sustainability, we would have a different debate. If we would use that money to help poor families to finance the energy bill, we would have a different debate. That's also, I think, an important aspect of Fit for 55. Shift responsibility and making sure that the money flows into the right projects.
I think that what we're trying to do with the Fit for 55 is that we're trying to find the road. We have the climate law, where we are reducing the CO2 emissions rather much, maybe not as much as we do in Denmark and Sweden and Netherlands, but in average in EU 55. That's why we say we need to be fit for 55. So we're trying to find a way to reach that goal. And I think the most important thing with the Fit for 55 package is that we really make it, we make sure that the polluter pays. Those who are not taking responsibility for the green transition, they have to pay more. It will in the end be more expensive to not do anything than to do something. So that's important. We also try to give the industry a better frame to make the green transition. For instance, the car industry, they tried to avoid the green transition for many years, but finally we're there now, so we're trying to make it possible. We want to ban, in fact, and remember this is Europe and not just Denmark, but we are banning, trying to ban this, the right to sell, we're trying to avoid that we can sell diesel and gasoline cars in 2035. I would have preferred it more ambitious, but still now we're going to do it. So we're doing a lot of things in order to make it expensive for the industry to keep on polluting and easier for companies who want to make the green transition. And then again, how does it impact you? Well, first and foremost, that we're telling you that we're taking on the responsibility. We're doing something now. We're saying that the society needs to change. And of course, unfortunately, it will cost you more. It will be more expensive to use energy, electricity. It will be more expensive to fly. But that's a part of the green transition. And if we at the same time avoid those who cannot pay, or if we try to make sure that those who cannot pay, that they're giving support from governments, then I think it's better. But the most important thing is that we're putting up a framework, making it too expensive to keep on polluting.
But I think that's interesting, the last thing that you said, because you're saying that you hope that the governments will maybe give some money to the people who have a hard time adjusting to the climate changes. But in the Fit for 55 package, you also have, what's it called again, the Social Climate Fund is a part of the agreement that you made. So do you think it is the responsibility on the nation states? Because one thing is that in Denmark, maybe it will be quite possible to find the money to give more money to people in lower income classes. But when looking at Greece or looking at Portugal or Spain maybe, then it won't be that easy. So should the responsibility be on nation states, or does this package also allow possibility or room for the EU to maybe fund some of these issues, the social issues that might come from this?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Because you could say that normally when we make legislation in the EU, we put up a framework, we put up some targets, we're making demands on the industry on how to manufacture a car and things like that. But then if we have to make the consequences for the citizens less tough, then it's up to the member states to find a way to support their citizens. But this time we're saying that, well, probably that's not enough, because if we don't do something at EU level, helping the member states to help their citizens, then we risk that the ambitions for the green transition will be lower. So we're saying that in order to make sure that we can deliver, then we're trying to give the member states money from EU budget to help their citizens. Some of them are even in the Social Climate Fund, is a part of giving money directly from EU to citizens. Well, that's still debated, and the final version is still not found. But we know, and we, as Mohammed said, we have discussions internally in our group also, and we can see that the more you come from poorer countries, like the former Eastern European countries, they are still not that far in their green transition, and they are still rather poor. Romania, Bulgaria, etc. They tend to say that they don't want to have high ambitions on the green transition because it's too costly for the citizens. So if we still want to have high ambitions, we need to help them to deliver on for their citizens. So we're trying, but we're still not there yet on how to do it.
Yeah, yes, I can agree. Maybe in the short perspective, we need this social funding because we have big differences between our member states. But in the long perspective, we must change and we must step up and we must be more progressive, of course. And we must do all these things together. The society, the companies, the households, the citizens. And for this, we need knowledge. And just a little picture from my municipality, because we have worked very hard with these issues. And we started with the children in school. We started with the children in school. They learned how to sort the waste. They learned how to recycle more in their own school. And they also learned, we give them a special ticket for the public transport, because we need to learn how we can use the public transport more than their own car, for example. And we found out then the children, they went home and they taught the parents. And that was a very good way of learning how we can live in a society where we are more responsible and when we take this responsibility together. So, as we say in Sweden, we need a system because we need both this knowledge, but it's not fair if we say, you must do it yourself, and you must do it yourself, because we need to do it together. So, when I see all these young people, I will say to you, don't have climate angst, because we, the politicians and the companies and so on, we must take our responsibility now for your future, because we need important decisions. And for example, in Sweden, I hope you have seen it in media, the industry in Sweden, they have now a unique production of steel, a total coal-free steel, and it's a revolution for this industry. And maybe we can learn from each other, so we can have this, and then we don't need this special money, because it's not, in the long-term perspective, a good model.
Thank you. Now, you're talking about the Eastern European countries as well. And of course, as you're also saying, we need everyone to get involved if we actually need to solve the climate crisis. But talking about the climate crisis, we are obviously also in a very specific crisis right now because of the unfortunate war in Ukraine. And I would like to ask, do you think, because after the war we talked a lot about that we needed to no longer be using Russian gas, we needed to find ways that we are not involved with Russia in the same way as we were before, and that obviously made the ground for doing a greener transition when we needed to go away from the black gases, the black oil from Russia. Do you think that we will see that Eastern European countries especially have more willpower to do something now? Has their perspective changed because of the, do you understand the question? Yeah.
Geopolitical, I mean, the problem here is that we're talking about energy politics and geopolitical politics.
Yes.
At the same time. I think nobody wants to be dependent on any other country in the world. Especially, I don't think you want to be dependent on Putin. That's, I think, a special case. But I think autonomy is something that every politician should try to improve. Because it means being less dependent from others, being sustainable yourself. It's good for your citizens, it's good for you. I mean, this is something I think that holds for every country in general. The problem today is that I this morning visited one of your bio electricity plants where they had to reuse coal because of the lack of energy, and so they closed down basically the biomass plant due to maintenance, and they replaced it for a short term now with coal, because at the end of the day we need electricity. So we have to do one step backwards in order to hopefully fairly soon accelerate the green transition. That's what we are doing today. But at the end of the day, coal and oil I'm not, I mean, again, the part of geopolitics, I think I covered that. But the reason we want to change our economy, I think, has also to do with healthcare. I was visiting Silesia. I do not know whether you know, it's a region in Poland. It's the highest, I think, coal-dependent region in the EU. And when you walk in that city, basically most people use coal for heating. And the smell of coal is everywhere. You can almost taste the particles. It's just strange. In Europe, 400,000 people die each year due to bad air quality. These people are not the richest. Usually they are the lower and middle income people that live near industry, near polluting sites, near highways. I also want to make sure that their future improves, that the air that they breathe in the cities improves. And I think the way we look at fossil use and our addiction to fossil use should fundamentally change, because these costs are never part of the equation. Never part of the equation. But when you live in a region where there is, let's say, twice more people that have COPD or any other, let's say, asthmatic disease, then you are much more aware that climate change and the use of fossils and CO2 and the particles are causing a lot of health issues. And I'm not talking about the viruses that are also increasing. I mean, we're talking about one crisis following the other. We as politicians try to take our responsibility by not blindly going forward, but looking at the most vulnerable and trying to include them in our plans. Are we doing it perfectly? I don't know. Are we going to see other crises in the future? Definitely. And we'll cope with them. But the only way forward, and this is where I passionately follow Crystal, is we should not get our eyes from the ball. And the ball is our ambition and our goals. And at the end of the day, I really believe the combustion engine took us 100 years to fully develop. Of course, the alternatives that we are working on will also take maybe decades before they become so cheap that everyone can use them. But waiting and doing nothing is not the way forward. It's not the way forward. We are rich enough, we can invest, such that in 10 or 20 years everyone can own an electric car, such that everyone can have heating based on, let's say, heat pump or any other sustainable source of energy. But if we don't invest, if we do not make sure that these innovations become cheaper and cheaper, and we start developing them into a sector, then no one will. And that's our responsibility, definitely. And if you traveled in Europe this summer, does anyone have traveled already? Did you drive around or visit some sites? How many rivers were like almost dry? I mean, Denmark will become the Costa Brava of the future. This is something that will happen in 10 or 20 years. People will come here to do some sunbathing, because here the climate will be somehow acceptable. I've been in Morocco, I've been in Spain. The heat is nice, but it's so hot, it's almost unbearable. And it will only become worse. And we see this, and then we forget about this. Which makes me sometimes, not even sad. I think that we're damn stupid as politicians. We see the effects, we see the harm it causes, the crops that are being lost due to either heat or floods, and we are not dealing with them. And it's our responsibility to try to take measures today so that in 2 decades these problems will not exist anymore. That's our responsibility.
But maybe to ask a follow-up question, just focusing on the people as well, because now you're talking about the city in Poland. How do you, as European politicians, or the politicians in Poland for that sake, go to the workers in this city and tell them, well, we need a green transition? Because I suppose that this city is also a lot of workers working there. Their living wage is from the coal industry. They need it. How do you go about, talk to them and say, well, there isn't any other job for you, but...
to be honest, Bauke was with me. He's my witness. The room was full of people from the unions, the Polish unions, and I can tell you it was not easy. I was, as we say in the Dutch, I was in the cave of the lion. It wasn't easy. They were attacking me from all sides, but I wanted to be honest to them. because the mines will close. The mines will close. The coal mines will close. Whether they close in 20 years or in 30 years, they will close. And I have to tell them that story because if you look at the amount of money we need to invest to make that sector somehow competitive, it's becoming useless. But we have to invest in new sectors.
Exactly.
Like in Denmark, I think you have one, it is in Denmark, we have one of the biggest battery plants, sustainable battery plants that's being developed. This is a sector we can develop in many other member states. When it comes to biomass, if it's sustainable, we can develop that as well. We can develop, the recycling. The idea of recycling is not that we like to recycle, it's because all these materials are becoming much more worth price-wise, because we can reuse them again in our economy. This is a sector we can further develop. And so, and similarly, we have many other sectors: hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, wind, solar. Of course, we have to create new jobs, but it starts by telling the truth to the people. And the truth is, the mines will close one day.
But maybe, because I completely agree, we need to tell them the truth, but we also need to give them some alternatives.
Yes,
so we need to make sure that we spend public money to re-educate people or support them in the transition, because otherwise they will be against us, and then we're not able to deliver on what we need to deliver. But the Danes here, they know it. In Esbjerg city on the west coast, for years they lived from the oil industry in the North Sea, but now we're starting to build an island, and we have a lot of ocean windmills. And I think that what we have seen is that those people working in the oil industry in the past, they are now getting re-educated, and they work now in the windmill industry. And that is what we need to do. And we have several examples in Denmark that we have seen industries growing and go down again. And for many years, many factories moved to the Eastern Europe and then out of EU because they needed to look at the labor cost, and they thought it was good to not have high salaries. I don't agree on that, but they moved out. But in the regions where these factories used to be, they have found, very often they have found new ways of having jobs. So that's what we need to do, but we need to understand that this is not for free. Yes. So in the transition period, we need to find solutions. And that is what we need to tell. But I understand the individual coal worker who is afraid of their job. But hopefully we can also tell them that it's not, they would probably not prefer their own kids to become coal mine
Exactly.
workers.
This is exactly what we also had in the discussion, that they're so proud of their job. I understand that. You know, in the Netherlands we had this, peat cutting. You know what it is? And we used to use some kind of, we say turf. It's like that you used to cut and then you used to heat.
Brunkul. Jeg tror det er brunkul.
Yes, I don't know what it's brunkul, but maybe.
Something like that.
This is something that people used to do, and then we found coal that was much more efficient. Then we found gas, which is much more efficient. So jobs go. Certain jobs could get lost. It's our responsibility to be honest, and then start a trajectory for this change. So the last mine will close in 2049. It's not tomorrow, or not even the day after. It's in 2049. So we have roughly 30 years to make sure that we phase out that industry, and from a European perspective, try to give them some other added value. It's not easy. If you've been a mechanic for more than 50 years or 40 years, it's not easy to even get educated in a new job. But it's our responsibility to try, and if not, we should help them at least. But as she said, every Polish mine worker loves and is proud of their job, but they prefer their children not to do the same job. Never. We had a similar mining region in the Netherlands that we closed in the 60s. Why? Because it didn't make any sense to mine coal anymore. It wasn't, nobody wanted to coal.
But can I add one thing? Because Mohammed, he said that the last coal mine in Europe would close
in Poland.
In Poland in 2049.
In Poland, not in Europe.
Honestly, I think that's too late.
I think so too.
We cannot keep on using coal in almost 2050. So we need to do more. But at the moment, it might be difficult to get them to close them down. But if they realize that they can get electricity and energy from other sources, and they can see that we're helping to re-educate, maybe they would be more willing to do it. So we also need to understand that sometimes we need to take some steps. step by step. Here now, we cannot maybe be too ambitious. I think that we should be more ambitious, but already in 2 years we can revisit our goals, and maybe then we can adjust.
Maybe ask
Yes,
you as well.
And the question back must of course be, if we do nothing, what will happen? Because this is the most important discussion. And I can see in the future that we will have a lot of green jobs, new jobs, and that's a very, very important and relevant discussion. But because you asked about the war in Ukraine, and everything has changed since the 24th of February, of course. But we must, and a war in Europe is always suffering for all the people, but also for the environment. And that's why we need to have the right solutions. I'm very afraid of when member states are choosing the old solutions in this very special time of war in Europe. So we need to take the fight for the right solutions for both the people and for the environment. Otherwise, it's not possible to solve this and to reach the Paris Agreement, because we have promised to reach the Paris Agreement. And if you ask me about the Russian gas, for example, I will see a stop. And I can see, as an example from Sweden, that we produce, also in Denmark, a lot of biogas. And that's very easy. It's fossil-free. You have it here on the fields. I saw it when I come this way from Sweden. And we take the waste from the agriculture production, and we need it as energy. It's very easy. And think about all the member states, the French fields and the Italian fields. You have fields in Netherlands?
We have fields here, but I don't know whether we have biofuels. No, but can I give you like 2 examples? One here from Denmark. If it wasn't with the vast amount of R&D invested by the government, but also by many companies, wind energy would never been this cheap as it is today. We in the Netherlands are profiting from the fact that Danish, I think Swedish and German have invested a lot in that technology. Now, the wind farms in the Netherlands are built with 0 subsidy. 0, it's also €0, also 0 crowns. So there's no difference there. When it comes to PV panels, if it wasn't the 150 billion of almost fully financed R&D from the German government, we would have never been where we are today. So these are 2 technologies where we've proven that if you invest a lot of money in R&D and in development, or in research and in development, then these technologies become cost efficient, cost effective. Now we have some other problems that we need to solve, storage, and we also need energy when there's no wind and there's no sun. But also there, if I look at the countries, and Denmark is also one of the strongest there when it comes to hydrogen, what we are developing there. And with hydrogen, this is a fantastic concept. We will probably fly with synthetic fuels based on hydrogen. We will have Maersk, you know, the big container company.
Maersk.
Yes, sorry. They will probably have their vessels based on methanol or an ammonia, which are also hydrogen products. I mean, this is something that fascinates me. We can do it if we put enough money and ambition, the same, into our plans. And then we can, radically change the way we live and the way we produce. And that's the positive side, I think, of the energy transition. And not only, the catastrophes and all the issues that we see. I think we also should show that the perspective and the possibilities. And Ørsted, the company that I visited, that I also pronounced probably incorrect, that was good. They went and just, I think in less than 10 years, they decreased their CO2 emissions with 88%. They have now 90% of their energy is sustainable, and they improved the profitability. So we see here in Denmark that you can go green, literally, and improve the green bank notes that you get at the same time. Which means that, it is costly in the beginning, but it can become very profitable. And if you sell that technology that you've developed in Denmark to other countries in the world, then I see a lot of economic value and also a lot of job opportunities for the people, for the sectors that we need to find jobs for.
I would even go so far to say that it might be costly in the beginning, but it will cost even more if we don't do anything.
No, definitely.
So time is quickly running out. Do we have any questions from down here? You can also ask them in, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's working.
Just try speaking.
It's working.
Yes.
We can hear you.
It's fine.
Okay. Well, my name is Duarte Costa. I am the co-president of Volt in Portugal. And the reason why I joined Volt, and I'm a climate change expert as well, was because I felt that politicians, when it comes to the climate agenda, fail on two perspectives that are essential and are the reason why we are where we are. Fail in understanding the urgency of the measures that we need to take, and fail to understand the science that is behind all our knowledge that we have on the decisions we have to make. And today, I see that you are committed with the climate change agenda, but I don't see a different narrative from that led me to join Volt and to do something for climate. And what I mean by this is that you've talked here about many ideas, many great legal reforms, including on the climate law with the commitment on the Fit for 55. But when we were talking about reducing emissions and introducing changes in the industry that will only take effect in 2030, for sure by 2030, and in some cases 2049, we are completely forgetting that we are far too late. I'll give you an example from my own country. In Portugal, this summer, we had 1% of our country was erased with flames. Our forests, our national parks are burnt. We have a drought that has impacted our water resources on over 58%. Our government, which by the way is a socialist government from your family, has announced that we have water for the next 2 years. If Portugal runs out of water, who is going to pay for it? The EU probably. So on top of all these commitments that are so late, you will have to start to pay the costs of Portugal running out of water, or Spain, or Greece, or Denmark being flooded constantly, etc. And what I fail to see at the EU level, and I wouldn't blame this because you are part of a system, what I fail to see is that the EU system, whilst is a great opportunity being a cross-country solution for legislation that is for all of us, we then have to negotiate internally in ways that drag us down. So when we have to negotiate with Poland and Hungary to make sure that they pass the necessary climate reforms, we always have to push to later the deadlines. We always have to diminish our ambition. You talked about ambition well, but ambition is not something reflected in our commitments. If you see the trend at which we are reducing emissions, up until 2020 and from 2020 now until 2030, why are we slowing down the trend after 2030? Why are we not climate neutral by 2040? Maybe you are pushing for this in the European Parliament, but something is failing in our institutions in Europe, in which we pass laws for the whole of Europe that are not aligned with science and with the climate emergency. And if you could comment on what can you do as elected members of the European Parliament into reforming the system, because I believe this way in which we have to have 27 prime ministers agreeing with the reform is impacting all of us.
That's
and
not
some
correct.
of us
That's
don't
not
have
correct.
water to drink anymore.
When it comes to the climate questions, we don't need unanimity. I can never pronounce it. Yeah, I always have difficulty with that word. We just have to have a majority. So the way we're doing things,
Not
of
in
course.
the council.
No, not even in the council. You don't have to have. They don't have to agree on everything. So when we make legislation on climate questions, for instance, and energy, we just have to have a classic majority. So we should push for that. But of course, we cannot do different if the citizens who compose the member states' parliaments and the European Parliament in a way where we have too many forces who fight against the climate policies. So our group is one of the most ambitious groups in the European Parliament. But it's difficult when we don't have a majority with us. And we saw that just in the springtime when we had some of the votes around the 55, where we saw that the right wing, they didn't want to support us, and we voted their proposal down. And then, of course, we went back to it and found solutions. But if you ask us, we would prefer to be more ambitious. And then you can say, okay, is the system broken? Well, it's at least very difficult to change the way we're making decisions in the short run, and we cannot wait for treaty changes because then the climate, then it's too late. So we need to use what we have. But what I want to say is that I really think that what we learn from this way we do things is that sometimes in order to have people and member states with us, we have to accept maybe, I'm not happy about it, but maybe low ambitions, and then a couple of years after we can revisit the goals and make them more ambitious when people and member states realize that it is possible. So we will push for more, and we're not satisfied, but we know that we need to start. So yes, we could do things better, we could do faster. If it was only for the S&D-Group to decide, the socialists, we would have been more ambitious. But we need to compromise, we need to find solutions. But we will push for this, because I agree, this is the final call to do something when it comes to climate changes.
Yes, that's right, and it's the same situation in the member states. We can see in Sweden, we have a social democratic government, and we have a decision to reach the net zero emissions by 2045. But we also have an election in 2 weeks, and I don't know the result because we will wait for it. But I can see that if we have a new government with right-wing parties, it will change, because the ambitions are different in different parties. So we need to act and work, as you asked, we need to work harder, and we need to step up and push this in the right direction you described, because we have no time to lose. We must act now.
Was it Pedro?
What?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. I can tell you that in the European Parliament, the plans that we have put forward, or the files that we are responsible, where we take responsibility, that Volt has supported us 100%. Why? Because I know David Bosselager very well, and I know how he has approached us. We are really fighters for ambition and for change, but also we're not activists. We have to we have to take reality and the rules that we've agreed upon as a starting point. I mean, because we really want to change. That's also the difference between us and maybe some other political groups. We don't walk away from the table, even in cases where we don't like the outcome. But if it's one step in the right direction, we will accept it. Because I can tell you, when I became just MEP, it was very hard, even in my political group, to get 100% of the votes behind the 55% decrease in ambition. It was difficult, I know, because I had to negotiate a file where this was one of the points. 1 year later, we supported 65% decrease in the climate law. The group. So what happens is, you know, when you break a glass, or when you want to get rid of a wall, the first hit that, you know, puts a crack in the wall is very important. It maybe doesn't change a lot if you only look at the surface. But afterwards, you can break the wall. And this is what we're doing. Today, this is the ambition that we fight for. And it's not perfect, but we are willing to accept it. And next year, we will push through that wall and make sure that the ambition is also a part of the council. Sorry?
The wall should have been broken many years ago.
That's true, but we're fighting. It's not easy. Because we have to deal with the rules and regulations that we have today.
Which need to change.
Definitely.
And I think that this is probably also a good time to say that there is a new election for the European Parliament in a few years. So this is also a good example of why the elections for the Parliament is very, very important if we need to do something with the green transition. But maybe finishing off, because we have 5 minutes left, I think I would just give you the opportunity to come with a final point. What is the most important thing for the people in the audience who have been following this debate? What is the most important thing for them to go home with from this debate, do you think? Maybe we can start over here.
Okay. The most important for me is that I can promise my children and my grandchildren that I take the responsibility to hand over a world where they can live in their future. So we need to act and we need to step up. And my ambition is that the European Union will be the first fossil-free continent in the world, and that we together in our member states can work with this very, very important issue. So thank you so much for listening and taking part in this discussion today. Thank you.
Mohammed?
I mean, after these words, I want to underline the words of Helen, because I think these are very important words. I have nothing to add except one point. Politics is too important to leave to others. So join a political group. If you think you have better ideas, come, join any group you want. Make use of your democratic right, and make sure that your plans and ideas are at the table to be discussed. That's my final message. And good luck, everyone, and thanks for coming.
And finally, and very briefly, the climate crisis is the most important crisis we're facing. We need to do something, but we cannot deliver on that unless we make sure that what we do is also social just. So that's why it's important to have both sides in, but we need to be more ambitious, and we're fighting for it. And please remember to vote for the national elections and the European Parliament election, and have a say on how much we have to do. We need to fight more, and we need to have higher ambitions, and that is what we're fighting for. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.